Silent Cowboy took in a pregnant girl cast out by her family, then learned she was his daughter. The road to nowhere. The Wyoming wind sliced through the prairie, bringing with it the promise of an early winter. Thomas Grant pulled the brim of his weathered Stetson lower, squinting against the dust that swirled around his horse. At 62, his face was a roadmap of hard years under the sun, each line earned through decades of working cattle and mending fences. Locals in Cheyenne recognized him as the solitary rancher who managed the Double Bar Ranch, with the exception of a few seasonal hired hands. He'd been out since dawn, checking the fence line along the northern pasture. The cattle had been restless lately, and he couldn't afford to lose any head with winter coming on. His horse, a sturdy bay quarter horse named Duke, picked his way carefully along the rutted dirt road that marked the boundary of his property. It was nearly dusk when he saw her. At first, Thomas thought it might be a trick of the fading light, a shadow cast by the scrub brush that dotted the roadside. But as Duke drew closer, the shadow resolved into a human figure, huddled against a fence post like she was trying to disappear into the weathered wood. She was young, maybe 20 or 21, with dark hair that hung limp around her face. Her coat was too thin for the weather, and even from horseback, Thomas could see she was shivering. But it was her condition that made him pull Duke to a stop. She was pregnant, heavily so, her belly round beneath the inadequate coat. The girl looked up at the sound of hooves, and Thomas saw fear flash across her face before it settled into something worse resignation. Her eyes were red-rimmed, whether from crying or the wind, he couldn't tell. Maybe both. "You need help, miss?" His voice came out rougher than he intended, gravelly from a day of talking to no one but his horse. She stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether he was real or some exhaustion-induced hallucination. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible beyond a whisper. I don't know where I am." Thomas dismounted, moving slowly so as not to spook her. Up close, he could see the worn-through soles of her shoes and the small backpack clutched in her white-knuckled grip. She looked like she'd been walking for days. "You're about 5 miles outside Cheyenne," he said, "on the edge of the Double Bar Ranch." "My ranch. I was trying to get to California," she said and laughed, a broken sound that had no humor in it. "My aunt lives there. Said she might take me in." Thomas didn't need to ask why she needed taking in. The evidence was clear enough. Enough young, pregnant, and alone on a Wyoming back road with nothing but the clothes on her back. He'd seen enough of life to fill in the blanks. "Temperatures are dropping," he said, keeping his voice neutral. "A storm is coming in tonight. You won't make it to California in this weather." She wrapped her arms around herself, around her belly, protective even in her exhaustion. "I'll be fine. I just need to rest a minute." "No, you won't be fine." Thomas surprised himself with the firmness in his voice. "Temperatures are going to hit near freezing tonight. You need shelter, food, and, from the look of you, about 12 hours of sleep." I can't pay for. Didn't ask for payment." He gestured to Duke. "Can you ride?" She looked at the horse like it was some mythical creature. "I've never been on a horse. First time for everything." Thomas helped her to her feet, noting how she swayed slightly before finding her balance. "The ranch house is about a mile up the road. Got a spare room, hot shower, and enough food to feed a small army. No strings attached." "Why?" The question came out sharp, defensive. "Why would you help me?" Thomas considered the question. Why was he helping her? He'd spent the better part of 40 years keeping people at arm's length, content with his solitude. But something about this girl, abandoned and afraid, struck a chord he thought had long since gone silent. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "And because I've got a warm house and you need one. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that." She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, but just for tonight." Thomas helped her mount Duke, then walked alongside, one hand on the reins. The girl gripped the saddle horn like her life depended on it, but she didn't complain. Tough, he thought. Whatever had driven her to this point, she was tougher than she looked. "What's your name?" he asked as they walked. "Lily," she said after a pause. "Lily Reyes." "Thomas Grant. Most folks just call me Grant." They walked in silence after that. The only sounds the clip-clop of Duke's hooves and the whistle of wind through the grass. The ranch house came into view just as the last of the daylight faded. A modest two-story structure with a wraparound porch and smoke rising from the chimney. It wasn't much, but it was solid and well-maintained. A refuge against the coming storm. As Thomas helped Lily down from the horse, he caught her looking at the house with something like wonder. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "It's home," Thomas replied, and was surprised to realize he meant it. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel quite so empty. Stories by the fire. The spare room hadn't been used in years, not since Thomas's foreman had retired and moved to Arizona. It smelled of dust and disuse, but the bed was solid and the quilts were warm. Lily stood in the doorway, her small backpack clutched to her chest, looking lost. "Bathrooms down the hall," Thomas said, busying himself with opening windows to air out the mustiness. "There are towels in the cabinet. Take a hot shower as long as you want. I'll rustle up some dinner. I can help. You can sit and rest," he said firmly. "Doctor's orders. You're not a doctor." "No, but I've birthed enough calves to know when a female needs rest." He caught himself grimacing. "Sorry, that came out wrong." To his surprise, Lily laughed, a real laugh this time. "It's okay. I feel about as graceful as a cow these days, anyway." Thomas left her to get settled and headed to the kitchen. He wasn't much of a cook, but he could manage the basics. He put on a pot of beef stew he'd made a few days earlier, sliced some bread, and put coffee on a brew. The familiar motions calmed him, gave him something to do with his hands while his mind worked through the strangeness of having another person in his house. Lily emerged half an hour later, her hair damp from the shower, wearing the same clothes but looking considerably more human. She'd put on a brave face, but Thomas could see the exhaustion in the way she moved, the careful way she lowered herself into a chair at the kitchen table. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked, setting a bowl of stew in front of her. "Yesterday, I think. Maybe the day before. It's all kind of blurred together." Thomas said nothing, just pushed the breadbasket closer to her. She ate like she was starving, which she probably was, but with a deliberate care that spoke of manners drilled in from childhood. Halfway through the bowl, she slowed, then stopped. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm not usually like this. Taking charity from strangers. Nothing to apologize for. We all need help sometimes. Have you ever needed help?" Thomas considered the question as he poured coffee. "Once or twice. When I was younger, I was cockier. I found myself in some uncomfortable situations during my time on the rodeo circuit. Whenever I needed assistance, someone was always there." "You were in the rodeo?" "That was quite some time ago. Different life." He set the coffee in front of her and noticed how she wrapped her hands around the mug like it was a lifeline. "How far along are you?" 7 months. "Is that accurate?" She touched her belly absently. The doctor at the free clinic in Denver said that everything looked okay, given the circumstances. "Considering?" Lily's jaw tightened. "Given that I am 20 years old, unmarried, and was thrown out by my family like garbage when they found out." The bitterness in her voice could have curdled milk. Thomas waited, knowing there was more if she wanted to share it. "My stepfather," she continued, staring into her coffee. "He's very concerned with appearances. The community holds the family's reputation in high regard. An unwed pregnant daughter didn't fit his image. My mother, she just stood there while he packed my things. Didn't say a word. What about the father? The baby's father?" Lily laughed, that broken sound again. "Jake? He'd already left. He enlisted in the military the day after I informed him of my decision. He's likely halfway around the world by now." Thomas was angry at the boy who ran, the parents who failed their daughter, and a world that could be so cruel to a child. But anger wouldn't help Lily now. "You said you were heading to California. Does this aunt of yours know that you were coming?" I called her. From Denver. She said she'd think about it." Lily's voice grew smaller. "That was a week ago. I've been walking and hitchhiking since then. I figured if I showed up on her doorstep, she couldn't turn me away. But she could, Thomas thought. Family could always find a way to turn their backs when it was inconvenient to care. He'd learned that lesson long ago. "You're welcome to stay here until you figure things out," he heard himself say. "Ranch work slows down in winter. I've got the room." Lily looked up sharply. "I couldn't. You don't even know me. Know enough. You're in trouble and need help. The rest is just details. People don't just do things like this." not without wanting something in return. The cynicism in her voice made her sound older than her years. Thomas recognized the wariness of someone who'd learned not to trust kindness. "I'm old, set in my ways, and honestly not fit for much company," he said. "But this house is too big for one person, and I could use help with the bookkeeping. My eyes aren't what they used to be, and the paperwork's been piling up. You help with that, and we'll call it even." I'm good with numbers," Lily said hesitantly. "I was studying accounting before." "Before doesn't matter. Are you capable of operating a calculator and deciphering my handwriting?" "I think so. Then we got a deal. You stay as long as you need, help with the books, and whatever else you feel up to. No charity, just a fair exchange." Lily's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back fiercely, but one escaped, trailing down her cheek. "Why are you being so kind?" Thomas shifted uncomfortably. Kindness wasn't something he'd been accused of in a long time. "Maybe I'm just tired of eating my own cooking," he said gruffly. "Now finish your stew before it gets cold." Later, after Lily had gone to bed, Thomas sat by the fire with a glass of whiskey, staring into the flames. The house felt different with another person in it, warmer somehow, despite the dropping temperature outside. He could hear her moving around upstairs, settling in for the night. He thought about Maria then, for the first time in years. Dark hair, bright laugh. The way she'd looked at him like he was something special instead of just another rodeo cowboy with more bruises than sense. Fort Worth, 1983. A lifetime ago. He'd loved her, in his way. But he'd been young and stupid. Thought there'd be time for settling down later. After one more season, one more championship. By the time he'd realized what he'd lost, she was gone, no forwarding address, no way to find her. Thomas took another sip of whiskey and pushed the memories aside. The past was past, but maybe, just maybe, he could do one thing right. He could help this girl, give her the safe harbor she needed to get back on her feet. It wasn't much, but it was something. Settling in. The first week passed in a careful dance of boundaries and adjustments. Lily insisted on earning her keep, despite Thomas's protest that she should be resting. She took over the kitchen, proving to be a far better cook than he'd ever been, and attacked the pile of receipts and invoices in his office with an organization that bordered on ferocity. "Your filing system is a disaster," she announced on the third day, emerging from the office with her hair pulled back and a smudge of dust on her cheek. "How do you find anything?" "I don't," Thomas admitted. "That's why I needed help." She shook her head, but he caught the hint of a smile. "I'm gonna need folders, labels, a calculator that actually works. Make a list. I'll head to town tomorrow." That became their pattern. Lily would make lists of things needed for the office, groceries, and supplies, and Thomas would drive to Cheyenne, grateful for the excuse to escape the sudden domesticity of his home. Not that he minded her presence. It was just different. The sound of someone else moving through the house, the smell of real coffee in the morning instead of his bitter brew, the way she hummed while she worked. It all served to highlight how quiet his life had become. On one of these trips to town, Thomas stopped by the clinic. "Doc Morrison," he said, catching the old physician as he was leaving for lunch. "Got a minute?" "Thomas Grant." Morrison's bushy eyebrows rose. "Haven't seen you since you got kicked by that bull 2 years back. Are you hurting somewhere?" "Not me. I've got a guest. Young woman, pregnant. About 7 months along. Want to make sure she gets proper care." Morrison's expression grew serious. "Is she in trouble?" "Not anymore. But she's been on the road, probably not eating right. I want to make sure she and the baby are okay. Bring her in. I'll fit her in whenever you can get here." "About payment. Well, work something out." Morrison studied him. "This isn't like you, Thomas. Taking in strays." "She's not a stray," Thomas said, more sharply than he intended. "She's just a kid who needs help." Morrison held up his hands. "No judgment here. Just surprise is all. Bring her by. We'll take good care of her." When Thomas got back to the ranch, he found Lily in the living room, going through a box of old photographs she discovered while cleaning. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, starting to put them away. "I didn't mean to snoop. I was just dusting and the box fell, and—" "It's fine," Thomas said, though his chest tightened at the sight of the photos scattered across the coffee table. Years of carefully buried memories spread out in fading Kodachrome. Nothing secret there, just old pictures. Lily held up one photo, a younger Thomas on a bucking bronc, frozen mid-ride with his hat flying off. You were really good, weren't you? At the rodeo? I had my moments. He sat down across from her, surprised to find the memories didn't sting quite as much as usual. Made it to nationals a few times. Never won the big one, though. Why did you quit? Got old. Got smart. I realized broken bones heal a lot slower after 30. He picked up another photo of him and his traveling partners, all grinning like fools, covered in arena dust. Besides, I'd save enough to buy this place. It seemed like time to grow up. Do you miss it? Thomas considered the question. Sometimes. Miss the camaraderie more than the competition. When you're on the circuit, you are never alone. Always someone to share a beer with, swap stories. Out here, he gestured vaguely at the empty prairie beyond the windows. It's peaceful, Lily said softly. I've never been anywhere so quiet. Most people find it too quiet. Most people haven't had everyone they know yelling at them for the past 2 months. She touched her belly absently. The quiet is nice. Thomas watched her sort through more photos, handling them carefully despite their apparent randomness. She paused at one, her forehead creasing. This one's different, she said, holding up a photo of a young woman with dark hair and a brilliant smile. It was in an envelope, separate from the others. Thomas's heart skipped. Maria. He'd forgotten that photo was in there, tucked away like a guilty secret. Someone special? Lily asked, then quickly added, sorry, none of my business. Her name was Maria, Thomas said, surprising himself. Met her at a rodeo in Fort Worth. Spent a week together that felt like a lifetime. She's beautiful. What happened? I was young and stupid. I thought I had all the time in the world. By the time I went back to find her, she was gone. Lily studied the photo, then looked at him with those two wise eyes. Did you love her? Yeah, Thomas said quietly. I believe I did. She set the photo aside gently, like something precious. My mother used to say that love leaves marks on us, like scars. Even when the person's gone, the mark remains. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She was, before she married Robert, before she forgot how to stand up for what mattered. The bitterness was back, sharp as winter wind. Thomas made a decision. I made an appointment for you at the clinic in town. Doc Morrison's a good person. Want to make sure you and the baby are getting proper care. Lily's hand went to her belly protectively. I can't afford. Already handled. Consider it part of our arrangement. Can't have my bookkeeper falling ill. Her eyes filled again, and Thomas stood quickly, uncomfortable with the emotion. I'll go check on the horses. Dinner's at 6? Thomas, she called as he headed for the door. He paused but didn't turn around. Thank you. For everything. Just being neighborly, he said gruffly, and escaped to the barn where feelings were simpler and didn't require words. Secrets and storms. The storm hit 3 weeks after Lily's arrival. A howling monster that drove snow horizontally across the prairie and rattled the windows in their frames. Thomas had seen it coming, the way the cattle huddled together and the ache in his joints that preceded every major weather event, and had spent the day preparing. Extra wood for the fire, supplies from town, and making sure the generator was working in case they lost power. Lily helped where she could, waddling now more than walking, her pregnancy advancing with each passing day. Doc Morrison had pronounced her healthy but underweight, prescribing vitamins and rest. She followed the first directive religiously, the second not so much. I should bring the horses into the barn, Thomas said, peering out at the darkening sky. I'll help, Lily said, already reaching for her coat. You'll do no such thing. Wind could knock you over on a calm day, let alone in this. She frowned but didn't argue, which told him more about her condition than any words could. Instead, she busied herself in the kitchen while he fought his way to the barn, the wind trying to tear the breath from his lungs. By the time he got back, soaked and half-frozen despite his heavy coat, the power had flickered twice. Lily had candles and flashlights arranged on the table, soup warming on the stove, and had dragged blankets and pillows down to the living room. Figure we should camp by the fireplace, she said. If the power goes out, at least we'll be warm. It was sensible and practical. It was also the kind of forward thinking that spoke of someone who'd learned to prepare for the worst. Thomas wondered again what her life had been like before. what had shaped her into someone so young yet so capable of reading trouble coming. They ate by candlelight, the storm a wild thing clawing at the walls. Between the howls of wind, the house creaked and groaned like a ship at sea. "I've never been in a storm like this," Lily said, pulling a blanket tighter around her shoulders. "There's something, all right. Had one about 10 years back that lasted 3 days. Lost half my herd, buried in snowdrifts." He saw her eyes widen and quickly added, "This one's not that bad. Should blow through by morning." The lights flickered again, then died. The sudden darkness was absolute, broken only by the glow of the fire and their candles. Lily made a small sound, not quite fear, but close. "Just the power," Thomas said calmly. "The generator will kick in for the essential heat and water pump. We'll be fine." They settled by the fire, Thomas in his old recliner, Lily curled on the couch with what seemed like every blanket in the house. The storm raged on, but inside their circle of firelight, it felt almost cozy. "Tell me about the rodeo," Lily said suddenly. "What was it like?" Thomas smiled despite himself. "Dusty, loud, never knowing if you'd eat steak or beans that week, depending on how you placed. But there was a freedom to it. Every town a new chance, every ride a fresh start. Were you scared, getting on those bulls?" "Every single time. Anyone who says different is lying. But the fear was part of it. Made you feel alive. I used to want to do something like that," Lily said softly. "Not rodeo, but something brave, something that mattered. What stopped you?" She was quiet for so long Thomas thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I got pregnant." It should have been obvious the thing that had derailed her plans, but the simple statement carried so much weight. Dreams deferred, life completely altered by one moment, one choice. "That doesn't mean you can't still do brave things," Thomas said carefully. "Might be different than what you imagined, but raising a child on your own? That takes more courage than climbing on any bull." "I'm terrified," she admitted. "What if I'm terrible at it? What if I turn out like my mother, too weak to protect my child when it matters?" "You won't." "How can you know that?" "Because you're here," Thomas said simply. "You left everything behind to give your baby a chance at something better. That's not weakness. That's the bravest damn thing I've ever seen." Lily turned to look at him, her face half in shadow, half lit by flickering flames. "My mother loved me once. I know she did, but she loved being comfortable more. Loved her nice house and her standing in the community and not making waves. When push came to shove, she chose all that over me. I'm sorry. She gave me a necklace before I left. Pushed it into my hand when Robert wasn't looking. Said it was from my real father." Lily pulled a chain from beneath her shirt, a silver locket catching the firelight. "I never knew him. She never talked about him, and Robert forbade any questions. But she said he gave her this and she wanted me to have it." Thomas's blood turned to ice. The room suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. But Lily was still talking, lost in her own pain. "I used to make up stories about him when I was little. That he was a soldier who died in some war, or a police officer killed in the line of duty. Something noble, you know? Something that explained why he wasn't there." She laughed bitterly. "Then I got older and realized the truth was probably simpler. He just didn't want us." "Lily," Thomas said, his voice strangled. Can I see the locket?" She looked puzzled, but unclasped it, handing it across the space between them. Thomas's hands shook as he took it, the silver warm from her skin. He knew before he opened it what he'd find, but the sight of it still hit him like a physical blow. Inside was a tiny photo cut from a rodeo program. He was young and cocky, smiling at the camera as if he owned the world. The inscription on the other side read, "Forever, T. Thomas." Lily's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you okay?" He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The photo stared back at him, accusatory. The years had passed in silence. All these wasted, lonely years, and he'd had a daughter. Maria had carried his child, raised her alone, and he'd never known. "I need to." He stood abruptly, the locket falling from nerveless fingers. "I need to check something." He stumbled to his bedroom, Lily calling after him, and pulled the old cigar box from his closet. His hands shook as he rifled through the contents until he found it. The receipt from a Fort Worth jewelry store, dated October 1983. He held a heart-shaped and engraved silver locket. Behind the receipt was something else he'd forgotten, a letter never sent. He'd written it after leaving Fort Worth, full of promises to come back, to make things work. But he'd gotten word of a big rodeo in Montana, a chance at real money, and he'd chase that instead. He relentlessly pursued one more ride, one more season, and one more justification. When he finally made it back to the living room, Lily was standing despite her condition, fear written across her face. "Thomas, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." He held out the receipt with trembling hands. "I bought that locket in Fort Worth, October 1983. She took the paper, confusion clear in her eyes. "I don't understand. Your mother, Maria Gonzalez, dark hair, worked at the diner near the arena, laughed like music and danced to the jukebox when she thought no one was watching." The color drained from Lily's face. "How do you?" "Because I loved her," Thomas said, the words torn from somewhere deep. "Because I was young and stupid, I left her behind, and I've regretted it every day since." "No." Lily shook her head, backing away. "No, that's not. You can't be. I'm your father, Lily. God help me. I'm your father, and I never knew. She never told me, never tried to find me." "She did try." Lily's voice cracked. "She tried for years. But Thomas Grant is a common name, and you were always moving. By the time she gave up, I was 3, and Robert had proposed and promised to give us a stable life." The storm outside was nothing compared to the one raging in Thomas's chest. His daughter, the girl he'd taken in, fed, and sheltered, was his daughter. And her child. "Your baby," he said wonderingly. "My grandchild." Lily sank onto the couch. One hand pressed to her belly, the other to her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. "This can't be real. Things like this don't happen." Thomas moved carefully, like approaching a spooked horse, and knelt in front of her. Up close, he could see it now: Maria's eyes, Maria's stubborn chin, but his nose, his hands. "I'm sorry," he said, the words woefully inadequate. "I'm so damn sorry. If I'd known." "Don't." Lily's voice was fierce through her tears. "Don't apologize for something you didn't know. She made her choice not to tell you when she stopped looking. You made yours to keep moving, but you didn't abandon us. You can't abandon someone you don't know exists. But I abandoned her. And because of that, you grew up without. I grew up with Robert," Lily said flatly, "who never let me forget I wasn't really his. Who told me every day that I was lucky he was willing to raise another man's bastard. So maybe it's better you weren't there. At least this way, I got to imagine you might have wanted me." "I do want you," Thomas said urgently. "I know it's late, and I know I can't make up for 20 years, but Lily, you're my daughter. That means something. It has to mean something." She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for truth. Whatever she found there made fresh tears fall. "All my life," she whispered, "all I wanted was to belong somewhere. To have someone look at me and see family. Not obligation or burden or mistake." "You belong here," Thomas said firmly. "You and your baby both. This is your home, for as long as you want it." The storm chose that moment to rattle the windows with renewed fury, as if the universe itself was underlining his words. Lily laughed through her tears, a watery sound, but real. "I don't even know what to call you now. Thomas is fine, or Grant, or," he swallowed hard, "or whatever feels right to you. We'll figure out as we go." She nodded, then surprised him by reaching out and taking his weathered hand in her smaller one. "Okay, we'll figure it out." They sat like that for a while, hand in hand, while the storm raged outside and the fire crackled in the hearth. Two people who'd been alone for too long, finding family in the most unexpected way, building trust. The morning after the storm dawned with clarity, transforming the world into a glittering wonderland of snow and ice. Thomas was up before dawn, as usual, but for the first time in memory, he hesitated before leaving the house. Everything had changed in the space of a few hours. The stranger he'd taken in was his daughter. The house that had been his solitary refuge for decades was now a family home. He found Lily in the kitchen, moving carefully around the space as she prepared breakfast. She glanced up when he entered, and they both froze, unsure how to navigate this new reality. "Morning," she said finally. "Morning. Did you sleep okay?" "Some." She turned back to the stove, pushing eggs around a pan. You? Some. The awkwardness stretched between them like a taut wire. This had been easier when they were strangers, when the boundaries were clear. Now, with the truth laid bare, neither knew quite how to act. I was thinking, Lily said carefully, maybe we could just take it slow? I mean, we can't undo 20 years overnight. That sounds sensible, Thomas agreed, relieved. Though I should probably tell you I'm not much good at talking about feelings and such. Never had much practice. I noticed, Lily said dryly, and some of the tension eased. They ate breakfast in companionable silence. Then Thomas headed out to check on the animals while Lily tackled more of his paperwork. It was easier to fall back into routine, to pretend that nothing had fundamentally shifted. But throughout the day, Thomas found himself studying her when she wasn't looking, searching for more pieces of Maria, more pieces of himself. That afternoon, while Lily napped, she finally admitted to being tired. Thomas drove to town. He had a different purpose this time, one that had him parking outside the small law office on Main Street. Thomas Grant, said Jim Whalen, the town's only lawyer. Haven't seen you since you updated your will 5 years ago. Everything okay? Need to make some changes, Thomas said, to the will. And maybe set up some other things too. An hour later, he left with a briefcase full of documents and a head full of plans. He stopped by the bank next, then the hardware store, then found himself standing outside the small baby boutique that had opened the year before. He'd never had cause to enter it, but now, the bell above the door chimed as he entered, and the elderly woman behind the counter looked up in surprise. Mr. Grant, what brings you here? Thomas felt heat rise to his face. In a town this small, news traveled fast. By tomorrow, everyone would know Thomas Grant had been shopping for baby things. He gruffly replied, I need some supplies. For a friend. Of course, Mrs. Patterson said, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. What kind of supplies? Thomas looked around the store helplessly. Tiny clothes hung on miniature hangers, blankets and toys filled the shelves, and he had no idea where to start. Maybe I could help? Mrs. Patterson suggested gently. Is this friend having a boy or a girl? Don't know yet. Well, yellow and green are always safe choices. How far along is she? She is approximately 7 months along. Mrs. Patterson bustled around the store, pulling items and chattering about necessities versus luxuries, while Thomas followed in her wake, feeling increasingly out of his depth. By the time he departed, the store had filled his truck with boxes and bags, leaving his wallet significantly lighter. When he got home, he found Lily in the living room, sorting through more photos. She looked up as he entered, carrying the first load of packages. What's all this? Thomas remarked as he placed the boxes down. Surplus. The items were for the baby. The lady at the store said we'd need these things. Lily's eyes widened as he brought in load after load. A crib that would need assembling, blankets, clothes in neutral colors, diapers, bottles, and a dozen other things Mrs. Patterson had deemed essential. Thomas, this is too much. I can't. You're not. I am. I'm here for my grandchild. The words still felt foreign on his tongue. I've got 20 years of birthdays and Christmases to make up for. Let me start now. Lily picked up a tiny yellow onesie, her fingers trembling. I hadn't bought anything yet. I was too scared. Like if I started preparing, something would go wrong. Nothing's going wrong, Thomas said firmly. You're having a healthy, loved baby who will have everything they need. How can you be so sure? Because Grants are stubborn as hell, he said. I've observed that you possess this trait in abundance. You must have inherited this trait from me. That startled a laugh out of her. Mom always said I was too stubborn for my own good. Tell me about her, Thomas said, settling into his chair. Don't end there. Tell me about before. What was she like as a mother? Lily folded the onesie carefully, considering. She loved to dance. Even when money was tight, she'd put on music and dance around her tiny apartment. She'd grab me and spin me around until we were both dizzy and laughing. She did that when I knew her. There was this honky-tonk near the arena with a fantastic jukebox. She knew every song. She made the best tamales. Every Christmas, she'd spend days preparing, even though it was just the two of us. Said traditions mattered, especially when you didn't have much else. They traded memories as the afternoon faded. Thomas's week with Maria, Lily's childhood years before Robert entered the picture. Slowly, they built a bridge between past and present, filling in the gaps of lost years. When did she marry him? Thomas asked eventually. Robert? I was 4. He seemed friendly at first. He had a decent job and a house and promised to take care of us. Mom was tired of struggling alone. Lily's expression darkened. The niceness didn't last long. Oh, he never hit us or anything like that. He was just cold, controlling. Everything had to be his way, and his way didn't include acknowledging that I wasn't his blood. Must have been hard on you. I survived. Mom did her best to shield me, but she was caught between us. Then when she got sick, Lily trailed off. She was sick? Cancer. Started when I was 16. Robert paid for treatments and good doctors. I'll give him that. But he never let us forget we owed him. Mom spent her last years trying to keep the peace and make everyone happy. I think it exhausted her as much as the cancer did. Thomas felt rage build in his chest at this Robert, who'd made his daughter feel unwanted, and Maria for not finding him, and at himself for not being there. But rage wouldn't help Lily now. When did she pass? 2 years ago, right before I started college. Robert made it clear I was welcome to stay as long as I followed his rules, stayed in line, and didn't embarrass the family. She touched her belly. Getting pregnant without a ring wasn't part of his plan. His loss, Thomas said firmly. Any man who can't see what a gift you are doesn't deserve you in his life. Lily looked at him with those 2 wise eyes. You don't have to say things like that. I know this is strange for both of us. Strange, yes, but that doesn't make it less true. Thomas cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the emotion thickening his voice. I've lived alone a long time, Lily. I figured I'd die alone too. Finding out I have a daughter and that I'm going to be a grandfather, it's like getting a second chance I didn't know I needed. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Not just about the baby, about this. What if we can't make it work? What if biology isn't enough? Then we'll figure out as we go. We're both pretty good at adapting when we need to. Lily smiled a real smile that transformed her face. Mom always said I was adaptable, like a weed that could grow anywhere. Nothing wrong with being a weed, Thomas said. They're survivors. They put down roots wherever they land and make the best of it. That night, they assembled the crib together, Thomas reading instructions while Lily sorted pieces. It took twice as long as it should have, with much cursing on Thomas's part and laughter on Lily's. But eventually they stood back to admire their handiwork. It's real now, Lily said softly, running her hand along the rail. There's going to be a baby sleeping in there. Are you hoping for a boy or girl? Healthy. That's all I want. She paused, though I guess there's something nice about patterns. Another girl will carry on the tradition of stubborn Grant women. Grant women, Thomas repeated, testing the words. I like the sound of that. Ghosts and revelations. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 3 days before Thanksgiving. Thomas was in the barn, checking on a mare with a swollen hock, when he heard Lily shouting from the house. The panic in her voice had him running, injured knee and all. He found her in the kitchen, clutching the phone, her face paper white. What's wrong? Is it the baby? She shook her head, holding out the phone with a trembling hand. It's Robert, my stepfather. He found me. Thomas took the phone, ice in his veins. This is Thomas Grant. Mr. Grant. The voice on the other end was cultured and cold, with the kind of authority that came from always getting his way. My name is Robert Reyes. I believe you're harboring my daughter. She's 20 years old and pregnant, Thomas said evenly. That makes her an adult who can make her own choices about where she lives. She's a confused young woman who's made terrible decisions. Her mother's death hit her hard. She's not thinking clearly. She seemed pretty clear-headed when she showed up half frozen and exhausted because her family threw her out. There was a pause. Mr. Grant, it seems there might be a misunderstanding regarding the situation. Lily has always been difficult, prone to dramatics. I'm sure she's painted me as some sort of villain, but I only want what's best for her. What's best for her is a safe place to have her baby without judgment or conditions. She's throwing her life away. Robert's voice hardened. I spent 16 years raising another man's child, providing opportunities her real father never bothered to give. She aimed for college, a future, and respectability. And this is how she repays that investment. Thomas's grip on the phone tightened. Investment. Like Lily was a stock portfolio instead of daughter. Let me make something real clear, Thomas said, his voice dropping to the tone that used to send hands scurrying to work. Lily's got a home here as long as she wants it. You are not welcome on my property, and if you attempt to force the issue, you will discover that people in Wyoming take trespassing very seriously. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Mr. Grant. I have resources and connections. I can make things very difficult for you. You're talking to a man who's got nothing to lose and everything to protect, Thomas said. That makes me dangerous in ways you can't imagine. Stay away from Lily. He hung up before Robert could respond, then turned to find Lily sunk into a kitchen chair, tears streaming down her face. How'd he find me? Doesn't matter. He can't hurt you here. You don't know him. He's powerful in Denver. He owns 3 car dealerships, serves on hospital boards, and golfs with judges. He doesn't like being defied. Thomas pulled out a chair and sat across from her. Has he ever hurt you? Physically? No, never needed to. He had other ways. She wiped her eyes. Disappointment was his preferred weapon. That look that said you'd fail them again, let the family down again. Mom would go to great lengths to avoid that look. He's not your family, Thomas said firmly. Family doesn't come with conditions. I cost him a lot of money over the years. He invests in private schools, tutors, and attire that aligns with his ideal of respectability. He likes to keep accounts to make sure everyone knows what they owe him. You don't owe him a damn thing. A man takes on raising a child. That's a commitment, not a loan. Lily laughed bitterly. Try telling him that. He actually kept a ledger. Showed it to me once when I was 16 and wanted to go to art camp instead of business camp. He itemized and tallied every dollar I spent on my upbringing. Thomas felt sick. What kind of man kept a running total on a child's worth? Did your mother know? She knew. I think it broke her heart, but she never said anything. She made her choice, traded love for security, and we all had to live with it. Lily touched her belly. I won't do that to my child. I won't let them grow up feeling like a burden or a debt. No, Thomas agreed. You won't. They spent the rest of the morning on edge, half expecting Robert to appear at any moment. But the hours passed quietly, with only the normal sounds of ranch life. By afternoon, Lily had regained some color, throwing herself into preparing for Thanksgiving with determined cheer. I know you probably don't usually do much for holidays, she said, pulling recipe cards from a box she'd found in the pantry. But I thought maybe this year. Are you planning to use your mother's recipes? Some. Some are from garage sales and library cookbooks. We never had much, but Mom always made holidays special. She held up a stain card. This was her turkey. She'd saved for months to afford one. We'll get a turkey, Thomas said. It's the largest turkey they have in stock. Ensure you have everything you require. You don't have to. I want to. Spending my first Thanksgiving with my daughter is truly memorable. That's worth celebrating. The word daughter still caught them both off guard, creating little pockets of silence while they adjusted to the reality of it. But it was getting easier, more natural. That evening, while Lily made her shopping list, Thomas made some calls of his own. Thomas reached out to Jim Whalen to ensure that all the legal documents were properly organized. The sheriff, an old friend, gave him a heads up about potential trouble. Finally, he dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Broken Spur Ranch, a gravelly voice answered. Miguel? It's Thomas Grant. Thomas. Damn, brother, how long has it been? 5 years? 6? Too long. Listen, I might have some trouble heading my way. Robert Reyes hails from Denver. He asserts that I possess something that he is entitled to. Miguel's voice sharpened. He had ridden the circuit with Thomas in the past and understood him well enough to decipher his intentions. What kind of trouble are we talking about? The type of trouble we're discussing involves finances, legal representation, and the belief that the world owes you favors. You need backup? Not yet. Just keep your ears open. If a man like that starts sniffing around and asking questions, I want to be informed about it. You got it. Anything else? Thomas hesitated. You remember Fort Worth? 1983? Do you remember the finals in which you were stomped by that bull named Tornado? It's difficult to forget the experience. You recuperated for a week. You remember a girl? Maria? Did you notice anything attractive at the diner? Dark hair, lovely smile? Yeah, I remember. You had a powerful attraction to her. Miguel paused. Why are you asking about ancient history? It turns out that ancient history is not as distant as I previously believed. I'll fill you in later. Just watch my back, okay? I have always been there for you, brother. Always will. Thomas hung up feeling marginally better. He had friends, connections of his own. He might not be the type to play golf with judges, but he was someone who would be there when it was crucial. He found Lily in the nursery. They both started calling it that, arranging and rearranging baby clothes in the small dresser they bought. She expressed her inability to sleep without opening her eyes. The baby's been active tonight. Can I? Thomas gestured awkwardly at her belly. She took his hand and placed it where the movement was strongest. For a moment, nothing. Then a flutter, a push against his palm like a tiny fist making itself known. My God, he breathed. Strong, right? Doc Morrison says that's a good sign. My grandchild. Wonder colored his voice. It's hard to believe something so small can change everything. Were you there? When was I born? The question hit like a punch. No, I didn't. I never knew your mother was pregnant. If I had, I know. Lily covered his hand with hers, the baby still moving beneath their joined touch. I'm not a skin, Thomas told her, concerning the rodeo, the encounter with Maria, and the week that seemed akin to transitioning into an alternate existence. About leaving, always planning to write her letters, he said. Never sent them. I kept thinking I'd deliver them in person when I got back. But there was always another rodeo, another chance at prize money. I was building something, I told myself, getting established, so I'd have something to offer. She kept newspaper clippings, Lily said softly, of your wins. I found them after she died, hidden in her jewelry box. She followed your career for years. Why didn't she try harder to find me? When did she know she was pregnant? Maybe. Have dropped everything. I believe you. But she couldn't know that. And after a while, I think it became easier to let you be a memory than risk finding out you didn't want us after all. They stood together in the nursery, hands linked over the next generation growing between them. Outside, November wind rattled the windows, but inside their circle of lamplight, past and present merged into something like forgiveness. Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving dawned cold and bright, with frost painting delicate patterns on windows. Thomas woke to the smell of baking and found Lily already in the kitchen, flour in her hair and determination on her face. Pie emergency, she announced without preamble. The apple filling isn't thickening right. Thomas peered into the pot of bubbling fruit. Needs more cornstarch and a splash of lemon juice. You bake. Had to learn. Man can only eat so many frozen dinners before he starts experimenting. He found the cornstarch and measured out a careful spoonful. Though nothing I made ever looked as good as this spread. The kitchen was a controlled chaos of preparation. Turkey in the oven, sides in various stages of readiness. Enough food for a small army rather than 2 people. I might have gone overboard, Lily admitted, surveying the battlefield. But it's been so long since I had someone to cook for on holidays. What did you do last year? Volunteered at a soup kitchen. Robert and his family went to Aspen. I wasn't invited. She said it matter-of-factly, but Thomas heard the hurt beneath. Their loss, he said firmly, though I'm glad their stupidity led you here. They worked side by side through the morning, falling into an easy rhythm. Lily directed, Thomas followed orders, and somehow amid the chaos, they found laughter. She told stories of Thanksgiving disasters past, the year the turkey caught fire, the time she'd confused salt for sugar in the sweet potato casserole. He shared his own meager holiday traditions, mostly involving a TV dinner and whatever game was on. That's depressing, Lily declared, checking the turkey's temperature. Didn't you have anywhere to go? Friends, distant family? Had invitations over the years. Never felt right accepting. Holidays are for family, and I didn't have any. He paused, struck by the realization. Guess that's changed now. Guess it has. They ate at 2, the dining room, table groaning under the weight of food. Thomas had forgotten what a proper Thanksgiving meal looked like. like turkey golden and gleaming, stuffing rich with herbs, and cranberry sauce jewel bright in Maria's cut glass bowl. This was hers too, Lily said, noticing his gaze. One of the few nice things she brought to the marriage. Robert wanted her to sell it, and it said it didn't match their good china. She told him it had been her grandmother's, but really she'd found it at a thrift store. She just loved it too much to give it up. She always did see beauty in unexpected places, Thomas said, remembering. Found a rusted spur at a pawn shop once and insisted it was lucky. Gave it to me before my last ride in Fort Worth. Did it work? Made second place. Would have won if I hadn't been distracted by a pretty girl in the stands. He smiled at the memory. Still have that spur somewhere. They ate until they couldn't anymore, then sat back, groaning. The baby, apparently excited by the feast, performed acrobatics that had Lily shifting uncomfortably. Active today, she said, rubbing her belly. All like good food. Kids know quality when they taste it, or they're protesting the quantity. I may have eaten my weight in stuffing. Grant family tradition, Thomas said solemnly. We take our holidays seriously. Grant family tradition, Lily repeated, testing the words. I like that. Like we're building something new from pieces of the past. They were clearing dishes when they heard the car. Thomas looked out the window to see a black Lincoln Navigator pulling up the drive, as out of place on his ranch as a yacht in the desert. Stay inside, he told Lily, who'd gone pale at the sight. But she shook her head, spine straightening. No, if it's Robert, I need to face him. I can't hide forever. They walked onto the porch together, Thomas slightly in front, protective. The car door opened, and Robert Reyes stepped out. He was everything Thomas had expected. Expected mid-50s, silver-haired, wearing clothes that probably cost more than Thomas spent in a year. But it was his eyes that told the real story. Cold, calculating, and used to buying what he wanted. Lily, Robert said, ignoring Thomas entirely. This foolishness has gone on long enough. Get in the car. No, I wasn't asking. You've had your tantrum, made your point. Now it's time to come home and deal with this situation properly. This situation, Lily said, her voice steady despite the hand Thomas could see trembling at her side, is my child. Not a problem to be dealt with. You're 20 years old, unmarried, with no means of support. What kind of life can you give a baby? A loving one, Thomas interjected, which is more than you ever gave her. Robert's gaze shifted to Thomas, dismissive. And you are? Thomas Grant, owner of this property, and Lily's father. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Robert's expression shifted from dismissive to calculating. Her father. How convenient. Where was this paternal concern for the past 20 years? I didn't know she existed, Thomas said evenly. The difference between us is, once I found out, I didn't try to throw her away. I gave her everything. Education, opportunities, a respectable home. You gave her a ledger, Lily interrupted. Every dollar spent, every debt tallied. That's not parenting, Robert. That's a business transaction. After everything I've done for you, you did it for appearances. The words burst from Lily like water through a dam. For your image. The successful businessman who heroically took on another man's child. You never let me forget how generous you were being. How grateful I should be. Well, I'm done being grateful for scraps of conditional affection. Robert's face darkened. You're being dramatic. Pregnancy hormones. Are you not making me see clearly for the first time in my life? Lily finished. I'm not coming back, Robert. Not now, not ever. You have no idea what you're giving up. The connections, the opportunities, the constant criticism, the emotional manipulation, the feeling that I'll never be good enough because I'm not really yours? Lily stepped forward, and Thomas saw Maria's fire in her eyes. I know exactly what I'm giving up, and it's worth it. Robert turned to Thomas. You think you've won something here? She's impulsive and irresponsible. She'll drain you dry and move on to the next sympathetic fool. Get off my property, Thomas said quietly. Now, this isn't over. She's carrying my grandchild. No, Lily said firmly. You made it clear when you threw me out that this baby was no family of yours. You don't get to change your mind now that I've found somewhere safe. Robert stood for a moment, clearly enthused to being denied. Then he smiled, a cold, calculated expression. You'll be back, he told Lily, when reality sets in. When the bills pile up and the baby's crying, this fantasy falls apart. You'll come crawling back, and maybe I'll be generous enough to forgive this betrayal. He got in his car without waiting for a response, the expensive engine purring to life. They watched until the navigator disappeared down the drive. Then Lily sagged against Thomas. "He's wrong," she said, though it sounded like a question. "He's wrong," Thomas confirmed. "You're not going back. Bills won't pile up because this ranch has been in the black for years, and babies crying is just part of life. We'll handle it. We. Thomas put an arm around her shoulders, steadying her. That's what family does. They went back inside to find the pumpkin pie had bubbled over in the oven, filling the kitchen with smoke. Lily started to cry. Hormones, stress, and the confrontation all catching up at once. Thomas did the only thing he could think of. He opened windows, scraped the worst of the mess from the oven, and salvaged what was left of the pie. "Still edible," he announced, presenting the lopsided remains. "It just has character now." Lily laughed through her tears. "Everything in this family has character, doesn't it? Wouldn't have it any other way." They ate pie for dinner, too emotionally wrung out for anything else. And as the sun set on their first Thanksgiving together, Thomas realized that Robert's threats hadn't scared him. Let the man try his worst. Thomas had spent 20 years building walls around himself, keeping the world at bay. Now, he had something worth protecting, and he'd tear those walls down brick by brick to use as weapons if needed. His daughter, his grandchild, his family. Robert Reyes had no idea what he was up against. Winter's promise. December arrived with a vengeance, bringing snow that fell in thick curtains and temperatures that made the barn chores an endurance test. Lily was in her 8th month now, moving with the careful deliberation of someone carrying precious cargo. Doc Morrison had put her on modified bed rest after her blood pressure spiked following Robert's visit. Nothing to worry about overmuch, he'd said, but his eyes had been serious. Just need to take things easy. No stress, plenty of rest, and let Thomas handle the heavy lifting. Easier said than done. Lily chafed at the restrictions, finding ways to contribute despite Thomas's protests. She'd taken over all the bookkeeping, organized his disaster of a filing system, and somehow managed to cook meals while sitting on a stool he dragged into the kitchen. "You're supposed to be resting," Thomas said for the 100th time, finding her wrapping Christmas presents at the kitchen table. "I am resting. See? Sitting down and everything." She tied a bow with practiced efficiency. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you have presents under that tree." The tree had been her idea too. Thomas hadn't put up a Christmas tree in 20 years, but Lily had insisted. They'd driven out to the back 40 and cut down a scraggly pine that she declared perfect, then spent an evening decorating it with a mishmash of ornaments from the general store and some they'd made from barn scraps and ribbon. "Who are all those for anyway?" Thomas asked, eyeing the growing pile of wrapped packages. "People. Mrs. Morrison at the clinic, who always sneaks me extra vitamins. Betty at the grocery store, who sets aside the good produce for me. And Jim Whalen, who refused to charge for the legal work. That was supposed to be on my account." "I know," he said, and I quote, "Tell Thomas his money's no good here when it comes to taking care of family." Lily smiled. "You've got good friends." "Acquaintances," Thomas corrected, uncomfortable with the warmth in his chest. "Friends," Lily insisted. "People who care about you, even if you've spent 20 years trying to convince them not to." She wasn't wrong. Since word had gotten out about Lily, and in a town the size of Cheyenne, word always got out. Our people had been stopping by. Casseroles appeared on the porch, hand-knit baby blankets materialized in the mailbox, and folks who'd nodded at Thomas for years suddenly wanted to chat when he came to town. "Miguel called while you were out," Lily said, changing the subject. "Wanted to know if we needed anything. I told him we were fine, but he said he's coming by tomorrow anyway." "Meddling old coot," Thomas muttered, but without heat. Miguel had been checking in regularly since Thanksgiving, appointing himself unofficial guardian of the Grant family, whether Thomas wanted it or not. He also said someone's been asking questions in town. A private investigator, he thinks. Very smooth, very professional, buying drinks and listening to gossip. Thomas's jaw tightened. "Robert? Probably." But Miguel said no one's telling him anything useful. Apparently, Wyoming folks don't much care for outsiders poking around. "Good." Thomas made a mental note to thank Miguel, probably with a bottle of the good whiskey he kept for emergencies. Let him waste his money. Won't change anything. Lily was quiet for a moment, focusing on curling ribbon with intense concentration. What if he tries something illegal? Grandparents' rights or something? Jim Whalen says he doesn't have a leg to stand on. You're an adult, the baby's not born yet, and he's got no biological connection. He's just making noise. He's good at that, Lily said softly. Making noise until people give in just to get peace. Well, he's about to learn that grants don't give in. We're too stubborn for our own good. Remember? That earned him a smile. Speaking of stubborn, I've been thinking about names. Yeah? For a girl, I like Sarah. It was my grandmother's name. Mom's mother. The one who actually owned that cut glass bowl. She touched her belly gently. Sarah Maria Grant. That's beautiful, Thomas said, throat tight. And for a boy, I was thinking Thomas. No, the refusal came swift and instinctive. The kid needs his own name, not to be saddled with mine. Then maybe William? Will for short? It's a good, strong name. William Grant. Thomas tested the sound. I like it. They were interrupted by the phone. Lily reached for it, but Thomas was faster, protective instinct still on high alert. Grant Ranch. Thomas? The voice was female, older, and hesitant. This is Helen Patterson. From the baby store? Mrs. Patterson. Everything okay? I'm not sure. There was a man here today asking about purchases you'd made. He said he was a lawyer representing interested parties. I didn't like his manner, so I told him customer information was confidential. You did right. Thank you for letting me know. There's more. He was particularly interested in knowing if you'd bought furniture. Big items that might indicate a permanent arrangement. I might have mentioned that you'd bought enough to outfit 3 nurseries. She paused. I hope that was okay. Thomas smiled grimly. That's perfect, Mrs. Patterson. Thank you. He hung up and relayed the conversation to Lily, who looked puzzled. Why would he care about furniture? Building a case, probably. Trying to prove I'm setting up a permanent situation, that I'm somehow manipulating you. Thomas shrugged. Let him. Every crib I buy just proves I'm committed to taking care of my family. That night, snow began falling again, heavy and silent. Thomas did his final check of the animals, making sure everyone was secure for what looked to be a significant storm. When he came back in, he found Lily standing at the window, one hand on her belly, watching the snow fall. Peaceful, isn't it? She said without turning, like the whole world's holding its breath. The storm is supposed to last through tomorrow. We might be snowed in for a bit. Good. I like it when it's just us. No phone calls from Denver, no investigators sniffing around. Just quiet. Thomas joined her at the window. In the light from the porch, they could see snow already accumulating on the fence posts, transforming the familiar landscape into something magical. I've been thinking, Lily said, about after the baby comes, after I'm healed up. I should probably look for a job and start contributing. You are contributing. You know what I mean. Actual money. My fair share. Lily. Thomas turned her to face him. This ranch has been profitable for years. I live simply because I like it, not because I have to. You and the baby aren't a financial burden. You're family, and family doesn't keep ledgers. Her eyes filled with tears, a common occurrence these days that Doc Morrison assured them was normal. I don't want to be like Robert, she whispered, taking and never giving back. You give back every day, Thomas said firmly. This house hasn't felt alive in 20 years. Now there are cooking smells and laughter and someone to talk to besides the horses. You've given me more than you know. Pregnancy hormones are making you sentimental, Lily said, but she was smiling through her tears. Maybe finding out I've got a daughter is making me realize what I've been missing. They stood together watching the snow fall, the baby moving between them like a promise. In a few weeks, everything would change again. The quiet house would fill with baby cries, and the careful routine they'd built would shatter and reform around feeding schedules and diaper changes. Thomas found he was looking forward to it with an anticipation that surprised him. All those years of solitude, of telling himself he preferred being alone, and now he couldn't imagine going back to that empty existence. Thank you, Lily said suddenly, for taking me in that night, for not turning me away when you found out the truth, for all of this. Thank you, Thomas replied, for knocking on my door, for giving an old cowboy a chance to be a father, for bringing life back to this place. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white, covering the old tracks and scars with a fresh start. Inside the warm house, with his daughter beside him and his grandchild on the way, Thomas Grant finally understood what he'd been missing all those years on the rodeo circuit. Not the applause or the prize money or the adrenaline rush of 8 seconds on a bull. Just this family, home, and the quiet promise of tomorrow. The storm before. The contractions started at 3 in the morning, 2 weeks before Lily's due date. Thomas woke to the sound of movement in the hall, followed by a muffled gasp. He was up and out of bed before fully awake, finding Lily gripping the bathroom doorframe, her face pale in the harsh overhead light. I think, she breathed through obviously clenched teeth. I think it's time. Are you sure? Could be false labor. Doc Morrison said. My water broke, she interrupted, and he noticed the puddle at her feet. Pretty sure that's not false. Thomas's mind went blank for a moment, all his careful preparation vanishing in the face of reality. Then training kicked in, not from any book or class, but from decades of handling emergencies on the ranch. Stay calm. Move with purpose. One step at a time. Okay, let's get you changed into the truck. Hospital bags by the door. It has been for 2 weeks. She attempted to smile, but another contraction hit, forcing her to grip his arm. Oh, that's intense. How far apart? Maybe 5 minutes? They started an hour ago, but I thought it was just back pain from sleeping wrong. Why didn't you wake me? Because you've been hovering for a month, and I want to be sure before I sent you into full panic mode. I don't panic, Thomas protested, even as his hands shook slightly, helping her to her room. Right? That's why you've checked the truck's gas gauge 12 times this week and have 3 different routes to the hospital memorized. Despite the pain, she was teasing him. It helped, somehow, to make this feel less like an emergency and more like another step in their journey together. The drive to the hospital was the longest 45 minutes of Thomas's life. Snow had started falling again, because of course it had, and the roads were slick. Lily gripped the door handle through contractions, breathing in careful patterns they'd learned in the one birthing class they'd managed to attend before the weather turned really bad. You're doing great, Thomas said, not sure if he was reassuring her or himself. Liar. I already want to quit, and we've barely started. She gasped as another contraction hit. Why didn't anyone tell me it would hurt this much this early? Because no one would have babies if they did? Valid point. Oh God, here comes another one. By the time they reach